Hi, I'm Michelle Fakos, an internationally renowned and award-winning expert on Scandinavian art. I've been lecturing and writing on this topic for decades, and am a Swedish and an American citizen living part-time in Stockholm. I'm excited to share with you my research, gleaned from books, journals, letters, and conversations with other experts. I know how hard it is to find out about Scandinavian art because I had to learn to read Danish, Norwegian, Swedish, and German to do it. Are you with me? Let's get started. Sweden, 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 native land, our longings village, our home on earth. These words by beloved national romantic poet Werner von Heidenstam reflected the nostalgia and emotional attachment felt by many Swedish intellectuals toward the end of the 19th century. For Heidenstam, Sweden was simultaneously vast, our native land, and intimate, our home. A yearning for stability and connectedness affected all Swedes because all corners of that sparsely populated country experienced the demographic shifts and poverty generated by the Industrial Revolution. This encouraged the rising middle class, which had the leisure time to think about how to attain a sense of security and happiness in a rapidly changing world. What, they wondered, is the best strategy for creating a strong and stable nation? National Romantics looked to one of three places for guidance in helping their citizens successfully navigate this bewildering and distressing time: the national past, rural life, and nature. We'll examine each of these elements in order to understand their synergy in creating a generic Swedish national identity that all could embrace, and that led, by the 1920s, to the social democratic nation we see today. A social family where each contributes according to their capabilities and receives according to their needs. But before we examine these elements, it's important to understand the circumstances in Sweden that coalesced to create the path National Romanticism took. These included Gothicism, an early 19th century movement dedicated to the documentation of Sweden's material and cultural heritage, extending back to prehistoric times. It included 7 years of compulsory education for boys and girls, the understanding that immersion in nature was healthful, and finally, travel facilitated by train networks that spread rapidly across Europe, shortening by hours and even days the time it took to get from one town to the next. Gothicism had nothing to do with either Goths or the Gothic period, but rather expressed an interest in researching and preserving Sweden's past, both regional and national. The Goths were a pre-Viking Germanic tribe that settled in southern Sweden, giving the provinces of Östergötland, East Gothland, Västergötland, West Gothland, as well as the island of Gotland, their names. The voice of the Gothicism movement was Erik Gustav Geijer, a history professor at Uppsala University, a member of the Swedish Academy, a member of Parliament, as well as a poet and composer. In 1810, he established the Gothic Association and published a journal, Iduna, for lovers of early Nordic history, beginning in 1811. Members of the Gothic Association included influential priests, professors, diplomats, bureaucrats, and politicians. Geijer also lobbied for compulsory elementary education and contributed to the school book series used by all Swedish children during their 7 years of schooling. According to Geijer, every folk lives not only in the present, but also in its memories, and it lives through them. Every generation propagates itself both physically and morally, bequeathing to the next generation its customs and ideas. This tradition, that continues from one time to another, unifies a people, fostering their unbroken consciousness of themselves as a nation. It transmits to them their collective personality. By 1850, Gothicism's patriotic sentiments had permeated Swedish institutions and bureaucracy, fostering the promotion of a collective national identity through the appreciation of Swedish history, popular and cultural, as well as military and political. This mission was articulated by the Lutheran priest and educator Claus Theodor Oedner in the introduction to his 1868 Swedish history book for public schools, where he wrote, "The history of the fatherland is most important and dearest to us because it teaches us how our forefathers lived and worked, fought and suffered, what trials they experienced, what great things they achieved, and how our beloved fatherland gradually became what it is today." For instance, Hanne Hirsch-Pauli's 1896 painting, Princess at the Gate, depicts an imagined earlier time that the artist envisioned while on a painting expedition to the island of Gotland. Gotland's capital, Visby, was the only part of that small island saved from sacking by the Danes in the 14th century because the townspeople surrendered their gold and jewels to save their city. As a result, it is beautifully preserved. You might well imagine such moments if you visit. Pauli depicted this medieval scene as if Visby inhabitants enjoyed the same sense of security from foreign invasion as contemporary Swedes did. Visby was a wealthy trading city, capital of the International Hanseatic League, which was a trading consortium that operated a free trade zone from the 12th to the 15th century. Its trading partners included London, Lübeck in Germany, Riga in Latvia, and Novgorod in Russia. Hirsch-Pauli traveled to Visby with her husband Georg, also a painter, and their artist friend Richard Barry and his wife. The splendor of Swedish spring inspired him as well. In Valdemar Atterdag's departure from Visby in 1361, Barry depicted the most devastating and dramatic event in Gotland's history, one he had learned about from Oedner's book. Here we see the Danish fleet departing the island they had pillaged, their ships heavy with booty. Little did they know that the boat carrying their plunder would sink in a Baltic storm before reaching Denmark. Here, Barry adopted a symbolist approach to suggest the imaginative rather than documentary nature of the scene he painted. He did this by embellishing Atterdag's fleet with gold leaf. Find out more about this international late 19th century art movement in my video series, The Symbolist Movement in Scandinavia. Landscape and peasant life became the most important subjects for artists throughout Europe in the 19th century due to the overwhelming sense of insecurity experienced by everyone as a result of the Industrial Revolution. The countryside could no longer support all the people who lived on it. Many Europeans left their ancestral villages for factory and city jobs, or for other countries, where they had to survive in a community of untrusting strangers. Middle-class and wealthy urbanites, on the other hand, idealized rural life, a rural life they never lived, and envied a life among supportive villagers far from the danger, filth, noise, and hectic pace of cities. Swedish national romantic painters, most of whom lived in Paris during the 1880s, were horrified by the inhumane living conditions of Sweden's working poor. They felt a social responsibility to foster an egalitarian democratic society through their art. They envisioned Swedish nature and culture as a unifying national bridge that would encourage a sense of social solidarity between the governing and the governed, and their instincts were correct. Artists focused on depicting the culture and nature of their childhood homes. Carl Nordstrom, pictured here admiring the French countryside in a painting by Edvard Munch's teacher Christian Krogh, depicted the familiar geography of his native Tjörn, a rugged island off Sweden's west coast, while his friend Nils Kruger focused on the coast of Öland, an island off Sweden's southeast coast, where he was born and where the Swedish royal family now spends its summer vacations. Anders Zorn, although he traveled frequently and was commissioned by 3 American presidents to make their portraits, spent increasing time in his ancestral village of Mora in Dalarna. Midsummer Dance presents a carefully planned image of midsummer, a holiday that communicated differing ideas to differing audiences. We recognize the scene as a festive peasant celebration, but Swedish viewers, especially those from Dalarna, would see more. They would notice that the hour is late. On June 21st, the sun barely dips below the horizon, and only for an hour or so, its glow lingering until it rises again around 1:30 in the morning. Here, it is probably around 11 p.m. Another indication of the late hour is couples dancing to fiddle music rather than gallivanting around the maypole. Their foot and hand positions indicate that they are dancing the hambo, a couple dance originating in Dalarna. The maypole appears in the background. Earlier in the day, adults and children would have danced in a circle around the maypole, performing nursery rhymes like Little Frogs or Here We Go Round the Mulberry Bush. Richard Barry painted perhaps the most famous Swedish national romantic image. A New York Times critic interpreted this as an image of a lover's quarrel due to the distance between the figures and their stiff postures. Scandinavians burst into laughter when I tell them this, because to a Nordic audience, this image communicates gender equality and a shared appreciation of the singular beauty of summer in the far north. We know this from the sketches Barry made leading up to it. See how he considered various positions for the man and the woman? In both these sketches, the woman is in a position of dependence, of inferiority. She leans against a man in the sketch on the left, and on the right she sits while he stands. Barry settled on an image where they appear as equals, one he experimented with first in sketches. Standing suggests greater strength than sitting, so Barry arranged them standing symmetrically and framing a view of Stockholm's archipelago in the stillness of evening. No words are spoken, none are needed. Both individuals meditate on the long Nordic twilight, which lasts for hours rather than a few short minutes, as it does further south. In this painting, Barry directly addressed the bourgeois demographic that had the power to enact egalitarian change, a transformation that began in the 1890s under the leadership of Social Democratic leader Hjalmar Branting, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize and Sweden's Prime Minister in the early 1920s. Barry came from Stockholm's upper middle class, a group whose wealth enabled them to acquire seaside properties like Ekholmsnäs on nearby Lidingö, pictured here. It's an island still inhabited by Stockholm's privileged citizens who, then as now, understood that nature was not a dangerous place, but rather a source of health and vitality, individual as well as social. Barry student Gustav Fjestad also promoted this idea in his magnificent pastel, The Boy Who Sees with His Heart. Here, the body of the youth, eyes closed, completes the circuit between earth and water and sky in a practice now known as forest bathing. Zorn, too, celebrated the restorative properties of direct physical connection to nature for all, not just men, as was the understanding on the continent. The National Romantic movement unfolded differently and for diverse reasons in Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. How, you might wonder? Check out my other National Romantic videos. If you enjoyed this content, please hit the thumbs up button. And if you'd like to keep current with new videos or support this project, please subscribe to my channel. You may leave comments and questions in the section below. And check out my website, www.michelefakos.com, for related articles, books, lectures, and blog posts. What would you like to learn about Scandinavian art?